For those of you that would like to listen in Spanish, this meeting is being broadcast simultaneously, and Claudia will fill you in on the details right here. Well, nope.
Oh, esta reunión se está haciendo también simultáneamente en español. Ustedes van a poder en breves momentos escoger el canal de interpretación en español. Van a ver en el Zoom un icono del globo terráqueo. Cuando hagan clic en el icono van a poder escoger español. También ustedes pueden acceder al canal en español llamando a un número de teléfono 844-460-0074. Gracias.
Thank you, Claudia. I appreciate that. If you will, join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Josh, could you do the roll call for us this morning?
Yes, sir. Rachel Arizmendi.
Present.
Don Cameron. Here. Janae DaCosta. Mike Gallo. Eric Holst. Linda Humiston. Here. Julia Jackson. Bryce Lundberg. Here. David Mancera. Here. Michelle Pissarro. Joya Robinson. Here. Frank Salazar. Present. Joy Sterling. Patricia Stock. Chris Valadez. Mr. President, we do not have a quorum as of yet.
All right, Josh, we'll put off the approval of the minutes until we get a few more of the board members in. So at this time, departmental update, Secretary Ross, good to see you.
Good morning, everyone. Seems like August might be a vacation month or something. Huh? That seems like such a good idea if that were only possible. It's great to see everyone. I'm sorry I've missed more meetings this year than I think I usually have. And I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm chair of our National Food Safety Committee and I have to step out for a conference call at 11, but I'll come back as soon as I possibly can. So I just want to run through a few things around the department. Obviously, we have not been tasked with any emergency response specifics yet, but we have our staff that's closely monitoring that. Part of daily coordination calls started during the Mariposa fire, but with the rapid growth of the McKinley fire, pretty frightening that once again, Eric, we have fires that have acted like no fire has ever acted before, and it's pretty intimidating to see that happening. So that's on that front. The Siskiyou County Fairgrounds were activated last week as a large animal shelter, and we're housing about 50 to 60 large animals there. There's a separate site for companion animals, and it's a base camp, which is a good thing because the fire has been frighteningly close to the fairgrounds themselves, and it's really an exceptional fairgrounds. Their fair is the 13th, so here's hoping that we have the fire under control and the community can gather together to celebrate all things ag. We had very positive news last week. In case you missed the clips, the USDA announced another one of its local food procurement cooperative agreements. This is specifically funding to food banks with targets of supporting small BIPOC farmers and local communities. It's another investment that USDA is making under Building Back Better to really improve the resiliency and healthy access of local food systems. And so California, it was pretty formulaic how much would be available to the state. The secretary made it very clear that so far ours is the largest, but it is population-based. We got $43 million, approximately $43 million for the state. Over $6 million will come to the CDFA for two specific areas that we'll be targeting. One is building on the way we pivoted to meet the needs of low-income and hard-to-reach senior citizens during COVID, doing bulk purchases through a number of nonprofits, and they will put that into boxes and do deliveries. It'll focus on low income and especially rural communities where more and more seniors are going because of affordability issues, and it's very hard to get food to them. So that's an exciting opportunity to support small farmers and our seniors. And then the remainder of that will be focused on farmer-led aggregator hubs as a way of, David knows this is a very important need. I'm very excited about getting that program going. So just wanted you to be aware we continue to find these moments, and I know that our great Deputy Secretary for Legislative Affairs, Rachel O'Brien, will probably touch on the huge investment that's being made in farm to school, and building out that network is another way of supporting our small farms, the health of our kids, and local economies. We have an oriental fruit fly infestation, not only in Southern California, but right here in Sacramento. We're still doing the delimitation process on that. Very hopeful with such an active period of time for our farmers markets that we won't find additional pests and that we won't have to put quarantines on. That's really problematic. Farmers markets put everything under cover and netting. It can be done, but really working closely with our Sacramento County Ag Commissioner on that. I wanted to just update you in advance in case I get questions today. 2 meetings ago or 3 meetings ago, you directed us to formalize our Small Farmer Advisory Committee and our BIPOC Farmer Advisory Committee. Thea Rittenhouse, our Farmer Equity Coordinator Advisor, has been working through a process for that. We had the outline of what that would look like as far as procedures and bylaws and how the application process would go. We will be doing some stakeholder engagement on that in August and September, and we're very hopeful that we'll have those formalized by November of this year, and we'll put out a call for nominations. So a lot more outreach in putting that together. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure you were updated on that. I participated earlier it was in July. It was in July. Oh, this is the 1st of August. The Western States Departments of Agriculture had their regional meeting up in Washington State, which was great to be with colleagues. Food safety was a big issue. Farm Bill was a big issue. Water, drought, or lack thereof, except in Washington State with those big rivers. But drought and wildfires, we spent a lot of time on that because there are so many aspects of irrigated agriculture and specialty crops that don't fit into the normal emergency response and disaster relief programs. And then I wanted to close with touching on, we're going to be getting briefed on 2 PPIC reports that were released a week and a half ago. And many of you may have seen those. If you're interested, we're happy to make those reports available to you. Really focused on the continuation of longstanding drought in the Central Valley and the implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, really looking at and making recommendations about additional research and focus on dryland crops or less water-intensive crops that could keep some revenues generating in the Central Valley. A lot of work to be done in that space. And then a second report about mitigating dust, which we know can be a hazard if we have bare ground in the valley. So those are 2 studies that we'll be doing cross-agency briefings on those yet this week. And then finally, with the severity of the drought in the Sacramento Valley, Undersecretary Birdsong and I did 2 listening sessions. One was in Yuba City, Sutter County, last Monday evening. That was with farm workers and farm worker organizations to really hear from them directly what the needs are, trying to match what the resources they're not aware of and making sure that those get there, and then look for additional ways that programs that are in existence can support the farm worker community there. And then on last Wednesday evening, we were in the town of Colusa County, which is really kind of an epicenter, I feel, for the fallowing that's going on. I think in good years, they can plant as much as 50,000 acres of rice, which is very important for the Pacific Flyway, for all those birds. This year, there's approximately 7,000 acres. So you can imagine the repercussions up and down the value chain of people that provide the inputs and those services, as well as what this means going into the winter season when there would be a lot of milling and warehousing activity. So it was very, we had a very good turnout. We were able to hear every person speak. There's frustration, of course, but there's also just the emotional impact of this, which we've seen numerous times in the Central Valley. This is new for this particular community. And then we've been in ongoing conversations, Frank, with the Imperial Irrigation District, as well as farmers and impacted communities. And I feel that that needs to be the next place we go because of the Colorado River impacts. So we'll be in touch with you on that one.
There was actually a Colorado River Summit portion meeting last
Just,
Thursday.
yeah, that's great.
Because it elevated a conversation.
Yes. And it's going to be significant.
By all means, I look forward to all of it.
Yes, yes. So we're very interested in the additional funding that looks like it will be available. There's still the next 21 days or so of the legislature for our SWEEP program to make sure we're targeting areas like that and to make sure it works well for the farmers in that community for water conservation.
And Secretary, if there's anything I could do to facilitate that, let me know.
Great.
Thank you.
Happy to do that. And then we have Farm Bill listening sessions starting this month. So look forward to, some will be, only one I think was in person. No, 3 are in person, right, Josh? And then a couple of virtual ones. So we're collecting lots of information while we wait to see what happens in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary.
Don, quick question. Secretary, the acreage numbers on rice, was that just from Colusa County?
That was just Colusa County.
So other rice counties are probably
The
experiencing.
totality of the fallowing is still at about only 250,000. It's normally 500,000 or up to 500,000 acres, depending on water availability. So it's a very dramatic impact. We're very hopeful that Undersecretary Robert Bonney will be able to squeeze in a trip to California, hopefully yet this month. We keep reissuing that invitation.
Let me know if he does.
Of course.
You mentioned when the Secretary Vilsack was out here that amongst the many things going on was farmer-led aggregation hubs.
That's part of our piece of this.
Okay, is there support for other aggregation hubs, or is it just the farmer-led?
This is farmer-led specifically as a way of some of the success stories that we saw during COVID and the success stories of farmers who are very small, urban, and saw just with a minimal investment for, some cold storage, some facilities being able to provide those services within a very small area. So we are going to be focusing on farmer-led, not trying to duplicate what may be working in a region, but knowing that with so many small farmers, that can be enough to keep them more viable, especially as we have more and more interest with school programs and the scale of purchasing that they're doing.
Yeah. That might be a topic we want to dig into in the future, because, I have to admit, I've evolved somewhat away from having to force farmers to take on all this kind of
Right,
stuff.
right.
It's a hard job being a
Yes,
farmer.
it is.
To try
Yeah.
to run aggregation
Yes,
hubs,
yeah.
be a marketer, et cetera, is just
Yeah.
more on top. And we are seeing success where entities like school districts are serving as the aggregation hub,
Yes.
or other entities.
Yes, and that can work, but we're talking about some more rural, and that may be where it's a perfect partnership with some of the very successful small distributors who focus on small farms, that this could be a way of really making the transportation more efficient. We could get it all there in a location and then into somebody.
Well,
I won't name names.
we're in
but-
the midst of hiring several new cooperative extension advisors on regional food systems, and this is a topic I really do think
Yeah,
we should dive
it's
into.
important.
Because even for the small ones you're talking about, being able to really look at them and see what's needed, what's missing, what just little tweaks in
Yes.
policy or investment might make a
Yes.
difference. Some of that's answers we don't have.
Right.
And we should be looking into that.
Yeah, and that brings up, we will be, I'm hopeful by November, we'll be putting out the call for proposals for the regional food hubs. That was funding that was made available in last year's budget, and it needed some tweaks in this year's budget. And that's for 3 regional food hubs specifically for farm to school. So that will be something we'll be doing yet this year. And then I also wanted to announce we have one more grant program that will be rolling out this month, in fact, maybe this week, on the Agricultural Conservation Planning Grant Program. That was one, it will be $15 million this year, or 17 this year, in this fiscal year. I'm sorry, it's so much money, I can't keep it straight. That's a really awful thing to say because we might not have that anymore. 7 of that is to prioritize those farmers who are interested in doing the planning for transitioning to organic. And after quite a bit of stakeholder engagement, we have gone ahead through the Organic Institute, signed a contract for $1 million for the Organic Institute to provide a lot of that kind of technical assistance that we know is absolutely vital to the work of expanding that acreage. And so that's one way we're really trying to be smart about how do we make the investment so we can get long-lasting investment returns if we don't continue to have the kind of one-time funding that's made this possible. Okay?
Very good.
All right.
17 million.
$17 million. Thank you.
17.
Rachel and Josh, keep me straight. Thank you so much. I don't know what I'd do without you.
Yeah, I tell you, you talk about the drought, driving up here this morning, the number of acres that are either fallowed or trees that are dead, flat dead, not just older orchards.
New ones too.
These are new ones as well. And without water, they can't survive. One other note, Bryce and I attended the California Water Commission meeting about 2 weeks ago up here in Sacramento. It was great to begin the collaboration between the two agencies. So, Bryce, appreciate you and all your help.
Pleasure.
So thank you. That was great. At this time, we need to approve the minutes from the July 5th meeting.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Any discussion or corrections?
I just need to abstain because I wasn't here. So
Thank you. I didn't make it either. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
Opposed? So moved. All right, we're going to move to the legislative update. We're pleased to have Rachel O'Brien with us today from the California Department of Food and Ag. Rachel is the Deputy Secretary for Legislative Affairs of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Welcome. Good to have you here. Josh. Good to see you, Rachel.
Hi, good to see you. Thank you so much, Chairman, and hello to the rest of the board. If I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, I'm Rachel O'Brien. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Legislative Affairs. Just a quick technical question. Josh, will you be advancing? Okay, thank you. Great. Well, really happy to be here with you today. As you can see, I won't be here for much longer, but I will be back. We are right now, the legislature's returned as of yesterday. We are entrenched in the very end of this 2-year session, which ran from last year to this year. We have about a month before the legislative session ends, and legislation is still very much active. It is important to note, just for my presentation today, that a lot of things are still in flux. Bills are still getting amended, hearings are still happening, and I want to be really careful about speculating about some of these ongoing matters. In addition, there are some elements of the budget that are still being finalized, so keep that in mind as I go over things. Josh, you can advance. Thank you. So as I mentioned, second year of 2-year session. The legislature just returned from summer recess yesterday, and we're approaching the end of the year. August 31st is the last day of the legislative session, although sometimes they go into the wee hours of September 1st. And then the governor has until September 30th to sign and veto any bills. The legislature passed and the governor signed a $308 billion state budget. There are a few outstanding items, though, that I'll go into more detail that are going to be negotiated over this remaining month. And then after 2 years dominated by COVID-19, the first half of 2022 has continued to bring additional and new challenges for the state. Many of you are acutely aware of that. Elevated global inflation, spurred by lingering supply chain disruptions, Russia's war in Ukraine. In addition, we are seeing more extreme weather due to climate change, leading to more severe heat waves, drought conditions, worsening wildfires. Despite these challenges, there are opportunities, and California continues to move forward with some significant strategic investments. Josh, can you please advance? With that, I'm going to dive right into the state budget and kind of where we're at right now. So a majority of the budget has been closed out. Key components include over $17 billion in relief to millions of Californians to offset those cost pressures I mentioned due to inflation. The budget also adds infrastructure that's funding schools, higher education, broadband infrastructure, and clean transportation systems. The budget also banked away $37.2 billion in budgetary reserves, prepaying billions in state debts and making supplemental deposits into the reserve fund. This is going to be important going forward. Some highlights relative to agriculture and CDFA. We have the Drought and Water Resiliency and Response Package. This winter, of course, a record-breaking lack of precipitation pushed California into its third consecutive year of drought. The current budget includes $90.2 million in 21-22 for the Water Efficiency Technical Assistance Grant Program, our State Water Efficiency and Enhancement Program, also known as SWEEP, and direct relief for small farmers as part of two different multi-billion-dollar packages to support water resiliency and the state's response to continued drought conditions. Still pending as part of that package, they didn't close out everything in the drought category. For CDFA at least, is $60 million in that SWEEP category, and a GoBids program that CDFA has been collaborating on to provide $75 million in direct relief. This would be in the form of grants to agricultural businesses that have been negatively impacted by the drought. Next kind of category is this inflation supply chain. Just wanted to highlight that to address these rising prices and return tax proceeds to California, there is this central component of the budget that includes this $17 billion broad-based relief package. And then also the budget includes $110 million in general fund over 3 years for the Goods Movement Training Center in Southern California to support workforce resiliency in the face of supply chain disruption, and then accelerate the deployment of zero emission equipment and technology. Next is Farm to School. The budget included $6 million general fund for CDFA in 2022-23 to expand the Farm to School Incubator Grant Program. This serves schools across the state, along with $3 million ongoing to support 16 regional Farm to School network coordinators and market specialists. And I did want to highlight just some other things in this space that connect in with the Farm to School roadmap that we put out earlier this year in collaboration with the First Partner. There's also $596 million for universal free meals, $611.8 million for meal reimbursement, $600 million for school kitchen infrastructure, that includes staff training, $100 million for school food best practices funding, and then $45 million for a school food apprenticeship program. So there's a lot happening in this space. It's really exciting. Secretary has been leading in this area, and so huge kudos to her, along with the First Partner and the rest of the administration. In the Sustainable Ag Package category, the budget includes $242 million general fund in 22-23 as part of that 2-year $1.1 billion ag package that had been negotiated last year. So we can't forget there was this two-year package last year. Some of the funding went through, and then there were commitments made for the rest of it to be part of this year 2. And this funding includes programs to create healthy, resilient, equitable food systems. So, you think about our refrigeration grant program and our California Nutrition Incentive Program. This includes promoting climate-smart agricultural practices. So again, our Healthy Soils Program, our Alternative Manure Management Program and Dairy Digester Program, and then to support long-term sustainability and resiliency in other categories. More broadly, talking about climate, the budget builds off of the $15 billion that was allocated last year. We have an additional $39 billion over 5 years towards climate resiliency and integrated climate integrated climate, equity, economic opportunity across the kind of state's budget to mobilize this coordinated approach that we've been engaging on with our sister agencies in response to climate change. And then, of course, there are some things that still need to be negotiated in that package. The governor had proposed a nature-based solutions package where CDFA's Healthy Soils program had an additional $10 million. So we got $85 million as part of that 2-year ag package, but there's $10 million that's outstanding. And then in the governor's extreme heat package, CDFA had a joint proposal with Department of Pesticide Regulation for integrated pest management technical assistance, and then funding for our animal mortality management program. Next year's outlook, I did want to spend a little time on that. Can you advance? As we look forward at next year's budget and recognize, we could face economic challenges if inflation continues to rise, national GDP has fallen 2 consecutive quarters, and of course, interest rates, any interest rate increases the feds continue to make. We could find the state being much more judicious in the budget outlays for next year. And so we did a little exercise to pull together, what is CDFA's budgetary sources? What makes up our budget? 10 years ago, kind of comparing to today. And I put together these little pie charts last night for a visual to kind of show the balance. We've got revenues are one of the key components, which are things like assessments that are levied on our growers for programs like our citrus pest and disease prevention program. This category made up approximately 46% of funding in the 13-14 kind of years, 11, 12, 13, 14, but has fallen to 37% in 2021. And then federal funds for activities CDFA performs on their behalf. This number has fallen around 37% to now 23%. And then you see our general fund category, which has grown. It has increased over the last 2 years. It's actually doubled from 20% to 40%. So just something to keep in mind, something that we're actually going to be sharing, doing this little exercise we're going to be sharing with the rest of the department for us to make sure that we're planning wisely. Next slide. Just wanted to give a brief overview of just here are our Senate and Assembly Ag Committee chairs for agriculture. You've got Senator Andres Borges. He's based in Fresno. On the right, was appointed to serve as the chair last year and represents large parts of the San Joaquin Valley, ranchlands in the foothill in Amador County. You have Assemblymember Robert Rivas on the left, who was appropriated to serve as the chair in the fall of 2020 and represents a district that encompasses the Pajaro and Salinas valleys of the Central Coast. I will just note for Senator Borges, he is the only serving Republican chair in the entire legislature. Next slide. Diving in to some bills now. So I'm going to switch over to the legislative side. Please keep in mind, as I said, bills are still moving. You'll notice most are, actually I think all are in the Appropriations Committee, which is the legislature's fiscal committees assessing the costs of these various pieces of legislation. There were just over 840 measures that were heard in the Senate and Assembly fiscal committees yesterday. Additional measures are expected to be heard next week prior to what is called the suspense file. That'll be on August 11th. This is a hearing where both committees will basically list out which bills are passing and which are being held on suspense, meaning they're no longer moving for the session. Following that step in the process, the legislature will go into a floor session for the final 2 weeks, where they'll be voting on all the remaining bills and whether they're going to be sent to the governor or not. So I wanted to highlight some. We've got AB 778 by Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia. This is a bill that would require California state-owned or state-run institutions that purchase agricultural food products to implement best practices that achieve at least a 60% goal of the products purchased in a calendar year being grown or produced in California. And this would be by December 31st, 2025. Folks kind of have to provide some information if they're not able to hit some of those goals, but that's the bill at the high level. AB 2146 by Assemblymember Bauer Cahan. This would prohibit, beginning January 1, 2024, the sale, possession, or use of neonicotinoid insecticides, except for the use on an agricultural commodity. The bill does list some exemptions for this prohibition, which includes a direct action by either the Department of Pesticide Regulation or the Department of Food and Agriculture against an invasive plant or pest, among some other things. And then AB 2183, this is a reintroduced bill of AB 616 by Assemblymember Stone last year. That bill was vetoed by the governor. This bill proposes to enable farm workers to choose for the purposes of union elections between voting in person at a physical location as they can now, or utilizing a new option, which would be established by the bill, to vote by mail or drop off a ballot card to the relevant Agricultural Labor Relations Board office. Next up slide, we've got AB 2201. This is by Assemblymember Bennett, is a bill that piggybacks off of, definitely goes beyond the Governor Newsom's March 28th, 2022, so this year's executive order, which extended the previously declared drought emergency and imposed new limitations on water use. The bill would prohibit county, city, or any other water well permitting agency from approving a permit for a new groundwater well or for alterations of an existing well in a basin that's subject to SGMA and classified as medium or high priority, unless certain conditions are met. And then last on the Assembly side, we've got AB 2499 by Assemblymember Mainshine. Just an interesting note on this one, this bill, the issue, the policy, the fiscal provisions were actually resolved in the budget in June. I still wanted to flag this one. It is technically still moving. The author and the sponsors are still moving it forward. The bill would establish the Organic Transition Pilot Program. There was $5 million of funding in the June budget for this, with some budget bill language that established it. But the bill specifically would focus on supporting the economic viability of limited resourced and socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers who plan to transition land to comply with the Federal Organics Production Act by providing incentives. And then just a couple Senate bills. Next slide. SB 558. This is a bill by Senator Caballero that would create a farm worker climate resiliency adaptation program within the Strategic Growth Council to award $20 million worth in grants to eligible entities to fund projects that support farm workers, their families, and communities to adapt to the impacts of climate change. SB 907 by Senator Pan. This would create the Local Equitable Access to Food Grant Program within CDFA, which with some support from our Department of Social Services friends to expand the acceptance of electronic benefit transfers, also known as EBT, to help with processing at certified farmers markets, tribal operated farmers markets, and Indian reservations. SB 982 by Senator Laird. This bill would authorize the California Apple Commission to establish an organic apple certification program subject to the approval of the Secretary of CDFA. And this would be applicable to persons engaged in domestic organic production or processing and to persons engaged in importing apples to determine whether they comply with state and federal laws. And lastly, SB 1066 by Senator Hurtado, which would establish the California Farm Worker Drought Resiliency Pilot Program. This would be administered by the Department of Social Services to provide supplemental pay in the form of cash assistance for eligible households to meet their basic needs. I know that was a lot and I covered that fast, but I want to be judicious with your time and allow for questions as well. I just have one last slide on kind of content, which is this kind of looking ahead. You know, we've got the end of the legislative year coming up, August 31st. We've got an election year, which is November 8th, of course. And there's a lot of things happening in the redistricting space. You may have noticed some different districts, different district numbers on your ballots in June. There are at least 34 newly electeds coming to the legislature with the most recent turnover. This is the most we've seen since 2012. And so there's, opportunities that, come with that. And it's also sad to say goodbye to old friends. But the legislature will reconvene. Just a little note, we put January 3rd, 2023. That's when they'll officially come back into, kick off the year full time. They will come back in December to get, the new members will be sworn in following elections. And then the governor's budget, January 10th, 2023. So some important dates. And then just the last slide shows you our contact information for the legislative unit. I want to highlight that because my legislative manager, Dylan Lamonto, is here. Josh, can you advance? If he can give a wave. He will, of course, be standing in for a lot of things on the legislative front while I'm out on maternity leave. And then just the last slide is just Q&A. And I know we have a chance probably over lunch to connect as well if folks want to think about things.
Rachel, thank you very much. We'll open it up to the board if you have any questions concerning the legislative report. Glenda?
Yeah, back to one of your earlier slides that had the split between state and fees and federal.
Yeah.
I'm just really curious why the large drop in federal. What is that really attributable to? And is that something that like
Some of
NASDA and others, or is
No.
that a national thing?
So a lot of that was when they were finally able to agree on a budget a few years ago. The reconciliation took a big chunk out, and that has not necessarily been restored. The proposed appropriations that was passed out of the House last week does have an increase in overall USDA funding, but some of those withdrawals are still there, so that will continue to be a problem. The other thing is that it looks especially dwarfed because of what our budget historically has been, a third. And I continually remind everyone, it's very hard to explain one-time funding going into programs that are not part of our core function, and we can't count on those continuing, and it just dwarfs everything else, which is why we're so focused on how do we get the longest, most durable impact from the dollars we've been able to get. And a lot of it is for our Climate Smart Act programs, really positioning us for resiliency.
Go ahead, Bryce.
Good question, Glenda, and thank you for the answer, Secretary Ross. The overall budget, has it grown? I mean, I see these comparisons in the sources of funding, but would like the overall, like I think maybe what you mentioned, general funds have grown. Maybe federal funds haven't decreased in their total amount, but
budget
general
has
funds hasn't.
It has grown.
Yeah,
because of
great
one-time funds.
question. So we have seen, obviously, I think we've seen really the budget grow in all categories. I have a kind of a snapshot here. And so you really see, so the total on the revenue side, you had it was around 118 10 years ago. It's around 174, almost 175 now, in the general fund category, which, you've got about 76 10 years ago, 190 today. So, I mean, overall, you're just the totality of where our budget was in the 2011, 2012, 13 kind of era was around 300. And now we're almost up to 500, 475, 477.
And just a reminder, 2011 was my first year. 33% of the general fund went bye-bye.
The great investment in California and California's food supply in California's workforce and California's focus on climate change. I can't think of a better place. There might be equally good places, but fabulous places to invest in the future, the present, the future, and in leading the way in all these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bryce. And I know this is something I've heard the secretary a lot, and we hear the governor say as well, but he's really, committed to future-proofing and getting these programs to be, foundational, that maybe the funding won't always be there, but how can we get these to be long-lasting and live beyond the life of potential state investment? It's really critical.
Eric, you had a question?
Good question. I wanted to ask if you would remind us your sort of general approach to confronting legislation that comes at the department from the legislature. Is that should I change that? I don't know. I mean, I'm just curious. Like I'm sure that. So you can't advocate, or can you? I'm wondering what the rules are, what your approach are. How do you deal with legislation that maybe doesn't sound like a good idea to the department, or maybe that you're jumping up and down thinking this is a great idea? How do you thread that needle?
Well, so I mean, first off, when we it's an open approach to everything. Let's just see what's out there. I mean, as you can imagine, there's a lot of bills. And so we do spend a significant amount of time sorting through those. Which ones, do we want to, watch just or send to programs as information? Which ones should we be analyzing that either have a direct impact on the department or on agriculture at large? Ones where we can have a voice to provide perspective and feedback to the governor's office. I mean, that is one of the main functions of the legislative office, is to be providing that technical level of expertise, a lot of which comes from our programs. They're incredibly knowledgeable of the policies in these areas, and so pulling upon that to then bring forth some recommendations to the administration. I work really closely with the governor's legislative unit. We of course, advocacy is a nuanced space because we don't want to get ahead of the governor. We want to be very careful not to position on a bill that he himself or his team hasn't formally approved or taken themselves. And so we really try to approach things from a technical assistance capacity. Where can CDFA provide value for legislative offices that are reaching out, wanting to understand how certain programs or certain impacts might materialize? So a lot of our work is in that technical assistance kind of space. But every now and then we do get positions approved, and we will let offices know about that. We work really closely with the Department of Finance because, of course, all these bills go through the fiscal committees and the appropriation consultants as well. So it's an interesting area to navigate. I find it incredibly fun. I feel like it pulls together all these different areas that I've worked on in the past. And I do see myself as essentially someone who can advocate for not only the department, but the administration, but also somebody who protects them and looks out for them.
And the only other thing I'd add is how much time we also spend in consultation with sister agencies.
Yes.
Oftentimes there can be crossover, and we want to make sure as an administration, the governor is very fond of saying an all-of-government approach, that we're not walking into something that another agency actually has more direct authority for or may have a very differing opinion or analysis. So it's a very important part of the work that Rachel and Dylan do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Rachel, I had a real quick question following up on that, really on 2201. Has CDFA done an economic analysis of the impact on California agriculture if that was passed the way it is currently?
So we have not done an economic analysis in that space. We know that there are economic analyses out there that we've been helping to support, like the one coming out of UC Merced, the PPIC briefings that we're going to be getting next week. So as of now, we have not.
Thank you. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, Rachel, and maybe this is more appropriate for the secretary. Looking out towards today and maybe just a few years ahead, are there any anticipated or projected new or net new significant revenue sources that you see coming into the department, whether it's the execution of a program that will ramp up or any new fee-for-service type programs that creates new opportunities and value, opportunities for revenue for the department, but opportunities for value from the agricultural perspective, the producer's perspective.
Yeah, I can't think of new revenue sources like that. However, given the investments that are being made available at the federal level, we have programs with expertise. And last year we had a perfect example when our fertilizer research and education program received almost $4 million conservation innovation grant to really focus on nutrient management and water quality. And I feel that with the funding that's being talked about and has already been directed to USDA, we need to be grant writers and really pull together the kinds of coalitions that we've seen work together very effectively. And I think that's going to be hugely important. In addition to opportunities where this governor has really focused on building public-private partnerships, especially with philanthropy or with other organizations that have a shared common goal of what we're trying to do, especially in the climate space. But I also say on food security, food access, health and nutrition is another opportunity for all of us. We don't want to get into the space of what ag would do, but sometimes the best place would be to put something here and then connect it back to the organizations on the ground to get it to farmers and ranchers.
Chris, the only thing I would add, and this isn't in the new revenue category, but CDFA did receive funding last year to do an impacts assessment and regulatory reporting requirements, and to take a look at those. And specifically within CDFA, where are those fees coming for that are on our producers? We know that folks, are struggling, and so is there opportunities to try to help on the reporting side that saves on costs in other areas?
Go ahead, Bryce.
Well, Dawn, I thought your question or focus on AB 2201 would be a good one to see understand the impacts. The idea that's on medium and high is a bit of a concern. I farm in the Butte groundwater basin, or in the Butte GSA, and we are medium, and we're medium because RDU 1004 does exports, and a GSA that's, or a groundwater basin that has members that do exports, automatically get put in a medium, not necessarily because the groundwater basin can't support, but automatically because of that sort of activity of exports, and so if the whole area can't put in a pump because they participate in exports, would be a challenge. Maybe the bill takes that in consideration. I haven't studied it well enough, but
I know
we wanted to be low, but because that one district does exports,
right,
we get put in medium.
Yeah, just to share with you guys some additional details, the conditions that I met, basically the classification or being able to do the alterations or installations, is based off some conditions, which are that there's verification from the GSA managing the basin where the well is proposed to be located. The permit allocation has provided a written report by a professional engineer and geologist that concludes that the well will likely not interfere with existing production or function of other existing wells. And then the permitting agency considers the written report as part of public comments that are received. Yeah.
Right.
And this is probably a conflict of interest for me, right? And Josh is way in the back, so that's good.
Oh, so you think you can get
by with it? My daughter's on the California Audubon board, and she said she really likes SB 977. It's a conservation ranching incentive program, Senator Laird, and so she and I are working on that one.
Thank you so much, Bryce. That is a bill that we're tracking and aware of, so appreciate that.
Glenda?
Yeah, going back to the comment about grant writing and partnerships, I just, kudos to Karen and her team. We've been doing a lot of that. I don't know how much the board is really aware of how much we have been joining up. One great bit of news, and I'm knocking on wood because I don't want to jinx it, but we're anticipating word the end of this month that we may get the EDA F3, Fresno Merced Future of Food grant. They have cut it down a bit, I'm told, but it's still in the tens of millions of dollars. for that region to really look at, future of food, a lot of food tech research, et cetera. One other piece of good news that I don't think Karen even knows about yet, we've been informed that our A&R proposal to the NSF, National Science Foundation Innovation Engines, has been selected to prepare a full proposal for the large 10-year, over $100 million category. And just so you know, we'll be tapping into a lot of you as we move into that phase. What we proposed was that our three valleys, the Central Valley, the Salinas Valley, and the Imperial Valley, really represented much of the type of farming throughout the world, different ecosystems, different climates, different issues, and that if we could focus on food security, feeding us, the nation, the planet, that we could find really fantastic stuff here. And this isn't purely research. This is research with a strong focus on commercialization of new technologies, innovation activities, workforce, and economic development. So we've got a lot of partners already, and we're reaching out to others, but we were thrilled to get that notification just a week or so ago that, and Karen, we were planning to ask you to be on the governing board. I think Dawn's name came up too, but we'll be looking around the state for how we put that together, because we really want to be competitive. I spent 5 hours yesterday on a workshop from NSF on how they're going to judge these things, and I honestly think we can put together one heck of a proposal. And it's going to be academia, private sector, government, the partnerships, large to small, strong focus on our small farmers as well as our large. I'm actually reaching out to Janet Napolitano because her new Public Policy Institute at Berkeley is all about Homeland Security. Isn't food security Homeland Security? So we'll probably ask her to be on an advisory committee or something. So that kind of thing. Just FYI, you'll be hearing from us. We're pretty excited about it.
Yeah. Just curious, I know it's yet to be fully approved, but at the federal level, there's an agreement on climate, and just curious if you have any sense what may be in there for agricultural, natural working lands.
Really great things. It's over $20 billion goes to EQIP. It goes to the Conservation Stewardship Partnership Program. It goes to the Ag Land Conservation Program. Those are the three major ones. And I think there's additional research money that's in the regular appropriations that's moving through. So it's really focused on climate smart, climate resiliency. That's the one that really jumps out to all of us. There's a lot of things in the energy space that I think agriculture can benefit as well, but that's direct through USDA.
Any other questions from the board?
I have to go make my call.
All right. Thank
I'll
you.
just close and say thank you so much for your time, for your questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out if, Dylan and I can ever be of service.
We're going to go to public comment, see if we have any questions for you there.
Oh, okay.
Before you
Oh, gotcha.
get out. Josh, if you could check.
Yes, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your hand icon and I will unmute your line. Seeing no public comments at this time.
Thank you, Josh.
No public comments in the Spanish line either.
Gracias. Well, Rachel, thank you again, and best of luck to you, and we'll see you later.
Yes, you will. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to have you, Dylan. All right. Our next speaker is not with us, so we are going to head toward a little bit different direction during this time period that where we normally have the presentation, and that is our committee assignments that you were asked to give your preference to, and maybe we'll start at with regenerative, because we have 8 board members that have volunteered to be part of the regenerative committee. Normally, they go heavier in different directions, but But we do have eight members that would like to be on the Regen Committee. And I assume can leave them, if they have the interest, we can leave them all on. Unless you think
Well,
we
I'd
need to
recommend that
limit.
the committee should be 5, and just
5?
like previous committees, others can
Thanks,
serve
Josh.
kind of in capacity as board members, but not be committee members.
So how do we narrow down, since we currently have eight board members that are showing interest in being on the regenerative committee?
Yes, and I actually had one of our board members indicated this morning as well. So David Mensera also, one of the additions, so that's 9. And then I was able to arrange, Dawn, if you would like, Jennifer Norris was able to join us early. So we were able to bring Jennifer on from our Biodiversity and Pathways to 3030 conversation.
Very good, Josh. So why don't you think about that, your selection for committees, while we go to the next presentation, if you don't mind. So we have with us Biodiversity and Pathways to 3030. We have Jennifer Norris from the California Natural Resources Agency via Zoom. Jennifer serves as Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat at the California Natural Resources Agency. She leads the state's 30 by 30 initiative and oversees cutting green tape, which I wholly support, in support of landscape scale habitat restoration. So Jennifer, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Sorry I can't be with you in person. And appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to you all about what we're doing on 30 by 30 and other initiatives under our Nature-Based Solutions Executive Order. Josh, do you have our slides, or should I go ahead and do them myself?
Yes, I'll get them up shortly.
Great. So I just have a few slides just to sort of orient everyone, but my hope is that we can just have a conversation, because I find that people always have questions and I want to make sure I'm ready to answer them. So we can just go to the next slide. Thanks. So what I want to talk to you about today is 30 by 30, which is nested under Governor Newsom's Nature-Based Solutions Executive Order, which was signed in October of 2020. And this executive order broadly is intended to really elevate the role of natural and working lands in the fight against climate change, recognizing their importance to our state and the value they bring to the climate crisis, as well as elevating the need to protect biodiversity in the process. And this executive order, 30 by 30, gets a lot of attention, but it has many, many different elements. And some of the key ones I pulled out for this slide for you. So it includes the goal, the admonition to us and Department of Food and Ag to work to promote pollinators and healthy soils. It calls for the development of the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy, which is also was released at the same time as mine, which is really a document that identifies all the different ways we can manage lands to both sequester more carbon and use our lands to address the impacts of climate change. It calls for nature-based farmer and rancher-led solutions to be included in the scoping plan. And you should see that now in the scoping plan, identifying ways that different land actions can help us achieve our climate goals. It calls for the acceleration of restoration. It calls for more cutting green tape, science partnerships, and then our commitment to conserve 30% of lands and coastal waters by 2030. So the 30 by 30 initiative. And I'll tell you a little bit about 30 by 30, but I want you to keep all those other pieces in mind as I go through. So next slide. So we released in August, like my brain is, I'm sorry, I'm coming down with something. I'm hoping it's not COVID, but it probably is. So if I stumble, give me a break. So we released our Pathways to 30 by 30 document in April this last year. And we're really proud of this document because we think of it as sort of a really crowdsourced document. We did 17 workshops all over the state over Zoom. thousands of people actually came out and gave us really good feedback on what sorts of actions help us achieve conservation across California, across a broad array of landscapes, what actions are helpful, what some of the barriers are. And we compiled all that into our Pathways to 30 by 30 document, which has the subtitle, Accelerating Conservation of California's Nature for a Reason. It's because we really think this is not inventing something new. This is building on all the good work that exists already across the state. So the document starts with our framework, which I think is really important to emphasize. We have key objectives and priorities. So going through our key objectives, which come straight out of the executive order, while we conserve our lands, we want to protect and restore biodiversity. 30 by 30 is at its core a biodiversity initiative. And I should have mentioned that, you know, this is a global initiative. Over 100 countries have committed to 30 by 30. I'm sure you've heard about America the Beautiful. President Biden put an executive order together that included this. But countries all over the world are working toward this commitment of protecting nature, really to safeguard our biodiversity. But we know that when we conserve lands, we can also expand people's access to nature. COVID brought it home that when we were in our houses and we had very few places to go, that access to nature became really important to people. And we want to make sure that every community has nature in their backyard. And then we also recognize that conserving lands can help us mitigate climate change by sequestering carbon, and also help us build resilience to climate change by buffering us from its effects like flooding and sea level rise. Next slide. And we also have some core commitments to how we will work through this effort. Fundamentally, and this is a goal of the administration, to advance justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We want to strengthen our tribal partnerships, and at the same time, protect our economic prosperity, our clean energy resources, and of course, our food supply, which are really fundamental to our economy. Next slide. So we put out a definition of what we think it means to be a 30 by 30 conservation area. I think it's really important to recognize this is not a definition of conservation, which is a much bigger category, but this is the kinds of lands that are going to meet this 30 by 30 goal. And they're land and coastal water areas that are durably protected and managed to sustain functional ecosystems, both intact and restored, and the diversity of life that they support. And this definition was took a long time to come up with, and we actually have 3 pages in our document that outlines, well, what does that really mean on the ground? So in the next slide on lands, which I suspect most of you are interested in, this really comes across a broad spectrum of landscapes that includes what you would normally think of as dedicated conservation areas, wildlife preserves, and so on, but also recreation lands and open spaces, and a fair number of our working lands, sustainably managed rangelands, some sustainably managed forests, both of which have durable protections, are included in this definition. And if you have the document or you want to check it out, I can put it in the chat. Page 26 goes into some detail about what this looks like. We recognize that watersheds and freshwater connectivity are really important. They may not be a lot of acreage, but they're essential to protecting all of these spaces. And then we also recognize that all conservation, this broader category, is really important to the functioning of these highly protected areas. So that matrix of conservation actions that take place across our open spaces contribute to the benefit that these more highly protected areas provide. 24% of our lands meet our definition for 30 by 30 conservation areas, and 16% of our coastal waters. Next slide. Just a quick word about coastal waters. Currently, that 16% represents our marine protected areas, both our take and no take MPAs. I want to point out that there's a decadal review in process of the MPA network and how well it's working. So this document makes the point that we're for more MPAs until we know how well they're working. But we do recognize that there are lots of opportunities to expand conservation, particularly in places like national marine sanctuaries, which are already managed by the federal government and maybe just need a few more protections to really meet the standard. Next slide. So the document spends most of its time actually going through these 10 pathways to 30 by 30. And these 10, buckets of actions, there's actions in each, and it's not everything under the sun that we could do, but really those things that we think are going to advance conservation in a meaningful way, either by addressing barriers or helping us move more quickly. So we call for fundamentally regionally led conservation. Our 30 by 30 initiative, and really everyone that I know about across the world, is intended to be voluntary and locally led. So the state isn't going out and finding places that we want to protect. We're working with our local partners to help them conserve the places that they already know that they value and they want to see protections for. So regionally led conservation is first and foremost. Then we have actions to, accelerate more acquisitions and more voluntary conservation easements, elevate conservation on existing lands, working more strategically with our mitigation dollars. There's a lot of mitigation that goes on across California. Let's make sure they're being done in the right place and that we're blocking up lands whenever possible. We want to accelerate restoration and stewardship. This is where cutting green tape comes in. We want to strengthen our coordination among governments, local, state, tribal. Within government, we want to make sure we're aligning our investments, making it easier to put together the kinds of land conservation deals that we need to, so people don't have to look in all these different buckets. And then number 9 is one that may be of interest to all of you, making this point that the matrix is really important to how well these highly protected areas function. We want to advance and promote complementary conservation measures. So this is a suite of measures that could occur across all kinds of lands, that while they may not be in places that have that, durable protection, they can absolutely boost our biodiversity in particular. So this might be things like hedgerows or neighborhood regional gardens that are of benefit, the way we manage some of our forests for conservation, even though they may be under active management, et cetera. And then at the end of the day, we want to make sure that what we're doing is working and adaptively managed whenever possible. Next slide. We also put together a pretty groovy geographic information system. This is online at our website, which is californianature.ca.gov. So this is a compilation of multiple different databases that the state has in different agencies, pulling them out of silos and putting them into one system where you can interactively play with and look for conservation opportunities across the state. So you'll see here, like the top right is the overlay of all the areas that currently meet our definition. The bottom right is biodiversity data pulled from Department of Fish and Wildlife. We have climate change projections, temperature, precipitation, and sea level rise, and then a map of which of our protected areas are actually open for recreation and access. So you can overlay all these maps and do some interactive modeling if you're a big GIS person, and really hone in on some of the opportunities that you might have in your region to advance more conservation. Or you can just play with it and track our progress towards our goal. And this is where we'll be posting that progress annually. Next slide. So the way we want to implement this plan is, again, by really leaning in on the groups and organizations that are already doing this work. So that's regional coalitions and work groups, our tribal partners. The governor called for a $100 million set aside for tribal conservation. That CNRA tribal committee is currently in the process of being stood up. So that would be a tribally led organization with support from CNRA, obviously, to figure out how to use that $100 million to really advance conservation work across California. We also recognize, of course, that the Ocean Protection Council is doing great work in the coastal water space. There's also the Biodiversity Council, which has been around for a very long time. This is local, state, and federal government partners that are working together on an array of land management issues, as well as the Biodiversity Network, which is a coalition of scientists and practitioners that are really thinking about the science behind biodiversity protection in the state. So we want all those groups to keep doing what they're doing. and for us to be sort of an organizing hub that helps everybody sort of keep track of what everybody else is doing, share information, lessons learned, best practices, and so on. And we're doing that through what we're calling the 30 by 30 partnership. And that will be organized around a coordinating committee. This committee, we just named it yesterday. We'll have people serving from all over the state, really being our eyes and ears and helping us identify needs across the state. What are conversations people want to have? What are some of the ways that we can really share information and help each other succeed? So sort of a loose coalition, but I think it's going to be a really effective way to keep everybody moving forward in the same direction. And I think that's my last slide. Yes. And with that, I'll stop and take what I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jennifer. That's a great report. Really got to the heart of how it's put together. Really, I learned a lot.
Thanks.
We'll go ahead and open it up to the board for any questions. Michelle?
Thank you for the presentation. So there's a scoping plan out, there's a climate smart land strategy, and this report, really talking about common resources. And so I'm curious, what is the plan for having these different plans work together or, be integrated?
So the development of the climate smart lands strategy and 30 by 30, they happened actually sort of in parallel. So we used some of the same public outreach meetings, and so that was done by Amanda Hansen, who's one of my peers. She's a climate deputy. So one, in the simplest way, like we're tracking each other's work, but at the same time, I think where it really comes together is in the budget. And I should have put together a budget slide, but the budget is so in play still. But last year, the legislature set aside $768 million for nature-based solutions, which was left undefined until these documents could be completed. But then what happened in the early part of this year is that Amanda and me and our partners from Food and Ag, we all came together and said, how do we want to use this money to advance the entire executive order? What are the key gaps that we see from our work? What are the overlaps? Where can we sort of get 2 for 1? How do we make sure we're really driving on the key priorities? And so I think the budget is a key way that we come together and really compare notes and make sure that we're being complementary whenever possible. But then also just fundamentally, we're tracking each other's work. And whenever I'm out talking to people, I'm talking about all the different pieces, as I'm sure are my peers.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yep, Bryce?
Jennifer, thank you so much for the presentation. And thank you for this list of 10 things that they are all just, I think, dead on, and 10 ways that I can see how our farms and our organizations can connect and help move this along. A couple questions I had on your maps. You've got those circle kind of graphs. Is that an indication of progress? I was wondering, do you have an overall what I would call score sheet or a scorecard, and how close we are, and seeing, are we at, is this kind of saying right now that we're about 3/4 of the way with lands between gap 1 and gap 2 and just over halfway on coastal waters, or am I reading it wrong, or is this kind of a scorecard?
You're reading it right. I said it really fast. I should have slowed down at that part because I feel like everybody knows it. But yes, 24%. So that's 6%, 6 million acres more or less on our way to 30% on land. So 24% of our lands in California already meet our definition. So yes, we're well on our way. I won't say that 6 million acres is going to be quick and easy. That's still a lot, but we've made a lot of good progress over the years in California. And yeah, we're about halfway there in the coastal waters. So we need about 500,000 acres of coastal waters as well.
And I just wanted to thank you for your personal and professional interest in the kind of the America the Beautiful program with President Biden's administration, and the emphasis on reactivating floodplains, and the voluntary agreement. And as the voluntary agreement is incredibly complex, but as I look at it, I think, wow, all this out of all these 10 things, it looks to me like several of them. Well, where are the 10? Like 1 and 3 and 6 and 9. We can accomplish a lot of those through the voluntary agreement. Thank you for your support in that area.
Thanks, Bryce. Appreciate that. Yeah, and I think to the previous question, a lot of the things we're doing at the state, we're trying to look for ways to achieve multiple benefits at the same time. And so, I work closely with Nancy Vogel on the water resilience portfolio. I'm working with Jessica Morris, thinking about the forest work. So really trying to find ways to get 2 for 1 or 4 for 1 if we can.
Eric?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. This is really a great demonstration of the commitment of this administration to biodiversity protection, which, kind of ebbs and flows in terms of public interest, and it's really heartening to see that this commitment is present. I wanted to ask about number 8, aligning investments to maximize. Well, I think it's 8. The question is, how? So not all conservation is created equal. There's sort of maybe an imbalance in the portfolio. If you look at the map, there's a lot that's sort of at higher elevations and in deserts, right? And there's parts of the state that are less well represented in conservation, and it's going to be difficult to create total balance because some of those other areas are heavily populated, or there are farmers that are growing rice and other things on those lands. So, in those other areas, it's possible to do really important conservation work at a smaller scale. It's not gonna get the same. It's not gonna get you to your goal as quickly. But how are you thinking of balancing the priority in some of those kind of less well protected places that have high conservation value, high conservation potential, but the scorecard could actually sort of work against doing work in those areas?
That is a great question. And I also said this quickly because my brain is foggy, so when I said we had key objectives, within those key objectives in the document, we go through, our priorities, which broadly speaking, recognize that, yes, there are places that won't get us the acres, but they're really important from a biodiversity perspective. So things like wildlife corridors, or maybe a small parcel of land that builds up a bigger block that reduces the amount of fragmentation. Obviously wetlands, they're really underrepresented. Back to Bryce's point, wetland restoration is really key. Is it going to get us, 1 million acres tomorrow? No, but it's so important from a, statewide perspective, but also ecologically, we really need them. So in part, that's how we're using the budget as well, is to identify, programs where there's a lot of need or a lot of demand, but also maybe they're underrepresented in sort of the broader conservation portfolio, and we need to do those investments more. And as we move forward in this process, my hope is we can do more of that kind of analysis and really, work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Obviously, they've thought about this a lot. They have their areas of conservation emphasis. That's what's in those cool maps. And we can sort of, annually keep track of how we're doing in meeting some of those less acreage focused goals, but that are critical for protecting our biodiversity. So really good point. And, obviously it's nuanced and complex, but it's something that we want to be keeping an eye on.
Don, a quick follow-up if I could. So the flip side of that coin is that some of those, dark green areas on the map that, again, sort of are reflective of kind of an advance that California has over other states in protecting land. Some of those dark green areas have burned at high intensity. Well, actually, a lot of those areas have burned at high intensity over the last, number of years. And, obviously, wildfire is a natural process, and not all of those burned acres are bad burned acres. Some of them are good burned acres. They're thinning out undergrowth and whatnot, but the catastrophic intensity is probably not good for biodiversity. So I just think it's important when the scorecard is like a great tool, right? You know, you resonated with it, Bryce. But I think it's important for California to take leadership in talking about how, you know, land protection is step one. You know, the land management is another part of it, and tackling these sort of big climate-driven, you know, sort of catastrophes that could undo a lot of good work is really important. So I know you're on top of that, but I just think it's important in the messaging of this to be talking about the quality of the habitat that we have and combating some of these large scale threats that are affecting biodiversity.
Thank you. I could not agree more. And can I get your name so you can do my next talk for me? Because that was great.
So Jennifer, this is Eric Holes from EDF, and it's been a while since we've connected.
Oh, hi. I can't see anybody. You're
sort
all
of in the distance,
tiny.
so you can't see it. But, yeah.
Thank you. No, I totally agree. Totally agree. And I'll try to do a better job of working that into my talking points because I agree 100%.
Go ahead, Bryce.
Right, this is Bryce again, Jennifer.
Bryce.
Jennifer, I was just in relationship to Eric's comment about working lands. I guess I was kind of hoping, Eric, that if the rice industry was 500,000 acres, that a block of 500,000 acres could come in, and that growers could agree to some of these 1 through 10 and say, "I'm in," and let's put those blocks of acreage on. Are you thinking that's possible, Eric or Jennifer, or where do the working lands of California agriculture come in, and can we start to look at filling in a lot of this valley with these light green and dark green?
I'm happy to respond, and Jennifer, I'm sure you could too. In our comments to the federal program, we kind of made a recommendation that and I suppose we should forward these to you, Jennifer, as well. I'm sorry that we weren't on top of getting our federal comments to the state, so we'll remedy that. But you know, it's a complicated idea, and you mentioned nuance, and it's one that's going to be sort of tricky to implement. But again, not all acres are created equal. But just a case study like the little levees that you have in a rice field are very small. They're like a little postage stamp, but they actually provide nesting habitat for all kinds of interesting birds and whatnot. So, could you find some way to recognize that and get that into an index that could talk about 30 by 30? So that would show as a really small contribution in terms of acreage, but it might be the only place available for a certain kind of a ground nesting bird to fulfill part of its life cycle. So 30 by 30 is fantastic. It's like this amazing concept, but the folks that have been working on biodiversity for a long time, and Jennifer's one of them, recognize that you have to have multiple ways to measure, the contributions that are made. And so I think if you could create encouragement through this process to get a rice grower, and you guys are many of you are already doing it, to give some, sort of, attaboys, some sort of recognition of those sort of smaller contributions that you can make to biodiversity in an operating farm, that would be a great thing.
So I would say the answer is not simple. And this is probably the place I get the most questions is working lands and easements in particular. So I think to answer your question, Bryce, it's sort of a yes, and it depends kind of answer. But there are lots of lands in the valley that I know about where really great conservation management is happening. The question is that protection durable? Does it meet our durability standard? Is there an easement that's going to make that happen essentially in perpetuity? And there are places like that. So if they're in our 30 by 30 count. And interestingly, I just got off the phone with Green Info Network, which is the database that's tracking all of this for us. And we were having this exact conversation and trying to figure out how to build sort of a toolkit to identify sort of how people fit on the continuum, because it's a continuum, it's not black and white. So yes, I want to include those places. And I said to them too, they said, is there an acreage under which you wouldn't want to include them? And I said, I want to include every acre for any reason, because that helps people see themselves as part of this movement. So if you're in 30 by 30, that's great. But the other point is about that pathway 9, which is that even if it's not a 30 by 30 conservation acre, it's really important, right, that you're not next to an airport or a parking lot. If you have really well managed acreage next door, that's going to provide a biodiversity benefit, and we recognize that. It doesn't necessarily show up on our map, and maybe we should think about how to do that, but it's a program and a benefit that we will continue to champion and promote. So to me, it's all part of the bigger story of how we're doing conservation in California. And yes, 30 by 30, it's just catchy and it opens the door for conversations like these, but there's a lot more detail and nuance to have in that conversation.
Go ahead, Secretary.
Hi, Jen. I'm sorry that I had to miss your presentation. I had to be on a
Hi,
national
Karen.
call. Hi.
That's all right.
And I know
You've
it's
heard it.
fabulous. I know it's fabulous, and I know we've all been in this for quite a while. I feel such a strong sense of urgency about keeping working lands for the ability to grow food today, even though it may be fallowed. I view that as much of that could be temporary as new technology, new innovations happen for food security, but also because I look at the population growth and knowing where the affordability issues are going to take people, looking at with high-speed rail, which is a good thing. It was very deliberately planned the ways that it is to make sure we weren't causing even more sprawl and loss of farmland. And so any way that we can document value, even if it's not, when we say durable, that's important, and I get that. But any way we can help people understand the true value of working lands, being able to continue to be those working lands today, as well as for the food security tomorrow, it's important that we all can create that kind of dialogue and the documentation to prove that. So that's where I really enjoy being a partner with you and with Secretary Crowfoot and everyone else in the administration, is that I just feel like we want to create, we know the future we want, and we all have an opportunity to create it, but let's not lose the lands that could be even more valuable in the future for the many benefits that could come from that. So I'm just really passionate and feel a sense of urgency about that. And I just wanted it to be out there for discussion.
I have nothing to add. I could not agree more. Totally agree.
Any other comments, questions? I guess, we on our farm, we put in quite a few hedgerows and provided really a lot of biodiversity. But, I get a little nervous sometimes when we start talking about endangered species that may be added to the list. And, it'd be great to have some type of a safe haven or to go along with the hedgerows. I'd feel a little more comfortable about, because I'd really like to expand, but I know that could turn into an issue.
Are you talking about bees?
Anyway, thank you.
I will just tell you, one of our actions is to really work harder on having those safe harbor agreements so that people can be incentivized to do the right thing without the worry about that. So that's another area that we highlight in our plan. Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, that's great to hear, because it is becoming concerning. And
yeah, totally get that.
That'd be great. Yep, we're going to go to public comments, so stay with us.
Okay.
All right.
If you'd like to make public comment on this agenda item, please use your hand icon and I will unmute your line. Joy Sterling, your line is unmuted. Joy Sterling? Rommel, your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Ramel. I was wondering if there's a public listing of the organizations that comprise all the different categories of partnerships that were listed on that slide.
So the Pathways to 30 by 30 document describes all those organizations. I can find the page if you give me a second, but that document is available online. You can go to the resources.ca.gov website and find that document. So it's sort of toward the end. I can find it really quick. But anyway, those are all described there.
Thank you.
Sure. Page 64.
Jay Sterling? I'm seeing no further public comments at this time.
Sorry, Josh, there is a comment in the chat. I think a question in the chat. I don't know if you saw it.
Sorry about that, Jen. How does 3030 integrate with a sustainable agricultural land conservation grant program?
Great question. So even before 30 by 30, Virginia Jameson, I think, are you in the room? I can't see anybody, but she and I were talking about, there she is, SALC and how we can build those two together. So to Karen's earlier point, SALC is an amazing program, right, for protecting agricultural land, protecting our open space against sprawl. And so to me, they work together. Ultimately, some of those places could actually be 30 by 30 conservation areas. Some of them will be part of that matrix that's really essential to our overall landscape level approach to protecting natural and working lands. So I would say that we're coordinating and integrating those pieces and thinking about ways that we can lift each other up all the time.
All right. Any other question? Not Jennifer, really appreciated your report, and really I gained a lot from that as well. And keep up the good work. And
all right, thanks for having me, and invite me back anytime. Would love to visit with you more, maybe in person.
And you're more than welcome to come down and see what we've done on farm. So and really hope you're feeling better.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. So we still don't have our speaker, so we're going to go back to committee assignments.
Can I bring up something very important that I forgot to report on? In the last 30 days, we have a new staff member in the executive office. Kayla Unger has joined us from the governor's office. She's our special assistant for climate, water, and drought, and it's been fun to welcome her and her insights. So I wanted to acknowledge Kayla. She was sworn in while I was out of town, and we did a formal swearing in last week. So welcome aboard, Kayla.
Yep. Congratulations, Kayla. So we had, like I say, we had 8 people that would like to be on the regenerative committee.
Well, let's make it a committee of the whole.
I think I was willing to serve on all of the committees, and if my name is on the regenerative, I would be happy to become a non-member participant.
Well, I mean, we can leave it wide open. You know, it's
they're all fabulous committees, and I'd be willing to serve on them, but please remove my name as a, if that would be helpful.
Thank you. Sorry?
Now only 8. Yeah.
And Michelle's.
Yes, Michelle?
I just had a question. Is the regenerative ag and climate combined? Mm-hmm. And I missed the last meeting, but I guess my question would be, if you want to make them smaller, do you want those both issues both together, or should you split them in two? And does that make a difference?
Well, following our discussion from the previous board meeting, it was to combine regenerative and climate into one. Was kind of the preference that I understood.
And we can leave it with everybody that's here. That's fine. It's just it's harder to get a quorum. It's hard to move things forward. That's all. You know.
So what I would recommend is maybe if the committee is smaller, just for logistics in terms of establishing quorum, et cetera, there's 5 committee members, and the others could be kind of ad hoc that are participants, but not formal members counting towards quorum, et cetera. Or we could do the full 9 members, but it's just harder in terms of quorum.
I
Chris, sorry.
apologize. I have a couple of questions because I missed the discussion. One of the things that we agreed we would be doing is there is yet a more formal definition of regenerative, and I thought that was a very specific thing for us to work on. And I'm just wondering if that was discussed in this, or if it's regenerative writ large with Climate Smart Ag.
That was the, yes. So the goal is to work on the definition of regenerative and also kind of continue in terms of discussing climate programs.
Okay.
Was
Thanks.
my understanding from the board. We were trying to avoid a conflict with the Environmental Science Advisory Panel in terms of climate.
Right, that's true. Chris?
What's the indicated interest on your other two? So your Ag Vision and
So Ag Vision, we currently have 4 board members that are interested in Ag Vision, and we have 2 for the Water Committee.
Okay, so I will remove my stated interest in the regenerative ag climate over to the Ag Vision Committee.
And I didn't get preferences in it. I'm fairly flexible. I would have suggested Ag Vision only because we're trying to do the A&R vision right now. It would make sense. But if we've only got 5 there, I don't mind being on water.
Oh, okay, that'd be great.
I'm fairly flexible.
Yeah.
And again, the board committees does not prohibit any of the board members from participating in the meetings, et cetera. It's just in terms of quorum and votes, it would be limited to committee members. But it's open for everyone to kind of participate, just as a regular public meeting.
Again, I would be happy to have Glenn be on vision, and I would be happy to be a observer or a participating. I did a bad thing. I said I'd be willing to be on all of them. Which
Bryce, that was really nice of you to do that.
where you'd want me. But I'd be happy to come on that.
Or somebody in the chat.
Yeah, the
Maybe it's
chat.
Joy.
Oh, please turn on mics when talking from Isidra.
Yep, if you could, make sure your microphone is keyed up
Oh, our mumbling is not.
when you do speak, please. Thank you, whoever sent that in. So maybe, Josh, you could survey the group for the regen and those that are definitely want to be there, and then maybe ad hoc, serving as ad hoc members as well. So we could define, 5 definite members and.
So I think we could define that for both Ag Vision and Regenerative today, and that would be kind of my recommendation. We did do the survey early on, so it would be hopeful to finalize both of those committees by action today.
I agree.
So if we remove Bryce from a member of Ag Vision and add Glinda to that gives us 5 members for Ag Vision, which would be Chris Valadez, Janae DaCosta, Doria, Patricia, and Glinda.
Okay, like a motion on that?
Yes.
Actually, I can just say too that if y'all both want to be on Ag Vision as members, I could be an ad hoc because I'm just interested and I want to learn.
All right, so we have a slightly different group. Is that correct?
No, so
Oh,
the
sorry.
members would be for the Ag Vision Committee, Chris Valadez, Janae DaCosta, Glinda Humiston, Doria, and Patricia.
Oh, okay, so we're good. Yep. All right.
That's the committee that I had said was a preference, but I am fine not being on it. Is all I was gonna say.
I did not get that notification. I'm sorry, Rochelle.
Okay.
Thank you, Rochelle. All right. So we need a motion to appoint the committee, the Ag Vision Committee, correct?
Yes.
I'll move to appoint the 5 members as presented to the Ag Vision Committee.
All right, do we have a second? Thank you, Glenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. All right. The Regenerative Committee. We have a total of 8 listed. Chris and Bryce have. Is that right? Chris and Bryce are taken off. So that gets us down to what, 6?
7 with David.
Right, sorry, 7. Do any of you that are listed here have a preference to be either definitely a committee member or an ad hoc member to the committee? We have Janae, Eric, Doria, Michelle, Joy, and who else?
Patricia Stock.
Yeah, Chairman, I can be an ad hoc. Yeah, I was the last one to sign up. So
All right.
Yeah. So you now should have 6.
And President Cameron, I'm going to make this really difficult because I know that Doria really wanted to be on regenerative, and I know we just made a vote, but I'd be happy to make a motion if it works for everyone else, that Doria on regenerative, and then I would go on the Ag Vision.
Members can serve on more than one committee as well to add complications.
Just worried about numbers. So if numbers are an issue, we were thinking that that's something that we could do.
Josh, I'm happy to be committed to regenerative, but be ad hoc.
Thank you, Eric. And so
it's great that we have so many people interested in being on the committee. I'm serious with you guys. It's great to see the participation. So what are we down to 5 at that point?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes.
All right. Can you read the 5?
By my understanding, we would have Janae as a board member on the committee. We would have Doria as a member on the committee. We would have Michelle, Joy, and Patricia.
All right.
And then David would be ad hoc and other members that are interested. And that does give us kind of diversity because we have our agricultural members and we have environmental members and academic.
Excellent. All right. I would have expected that as well, but no response. So there's always ad hoc as well. So all right. So we have 5 board members listed for the Regenerative Climate Committee. Do we have a motion to accept?
So moved for approval.
All right. And second. Thanks, Eric. Any further discussion?
And can I have a revised motion for the first committee to replace Doria with Rachel?
Unless Doria wants to serve on both.
I will be ad hoc. That's fine. On that,
You need a motion for that?
Yeah.
Ag Vision.
Right. We need a motion for the change.
I move to approve as revised.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Do we have a second?
Eric.
Right.
Perfect.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So moved.
Perfect.
And now we need a motion for.
Well, that does both Ag Vision and Regenerative Ag Committee. I do not have a water committee established.
All right. So currently there's Mike Gallo and Bryce. Is there anyone else that would like to be a part of the water committee?
I believe I emailed and said I'd be interested in that.
Great, Frank. All right.
And if anybody opposes, I'll derail your regenerative committee assignments immediately.
Excellent.
Do I hear a motion?
Anyone else? Are we good? Glenda? Yeah, I'm interested. And Glenda?
Well, we had Glinda on there.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't read your name.
So we have Mike, Bryce, Glinda, and Frank on water.
All right. All right, we need a motion to appoint
And we'll
the.
put Dawn on as well, so then it makes 5.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to tell you, that's where my heart is, so. Not that the others aren't, but it's always critical. So we need a motion to accept. Thank you, Glenda. Do we have a second?
Okay. Perfect. Scott, David.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Motion approved.
Perfect.
I really appreciate that. It's great to see the amount of participation with the board here. We do cover a lot of really tough topics and issues that come up, so it's good to have the committees in place. All right. What was our other?
Just as a reminder before we do a break, our next meeting is actually scheduled for Wednesday, September 7th. We amended our meeting date to coincide with a Farm Bill listening session, and we are pleased to have Doria Robinson hosting the board at her location at Urban Tilth, so we're excited about that. So it will be in Richmond on Wednesday, September 7th, and I believe the timing is 9 to 11 a.m.
Very good. We'll look forward to that. Thank you for hosting the committee meeting and the board. So thank you.
Yes, Wednesday the 7th. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Anything else we need to cover
No,
before lunch?
we're good. No, so I anticipate it would be a 9 to 11. The board meeting will be the Farm Bill listening session.
All right. At this point, we are going to go ahead and take a lunch break till 12:30. And it's one of the few times we've actually made our schedule. So,
I know.
so we will be back at 12:30 for those of you online. And thank you for joining us for the first part of our meeting today.
Is Richmond best getting from Oakland or San Francisco?
All right. For those, we're over on the
Burbank.
room to the left.
LA. Richmond.